Keep it funky. I don't even know where to begin. Like, I want my 1 hour, and 12 minutes back. That might have been one of the worst comedy specials that I've ever seen in my life. And I don't want to make it seem like, yo, what up, big? I don't want to make it seem like I hate Chappelle, right? I mean, any spoilers, fam? Like I said, it says at the top, Dave Chappelle recap. I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? So hey, you do what you gotta do. But I don't want to make it seem like I hate Dave Chappelle, right? I know for some people he's a comedic genius. For me, he's average. And I recognize some of my opinions might not necessarily be the majority. Some people might believe me to be a contrarian, which I am at times. But, you know, as far as Chappelle goes, and I've seen the majority of his stand-ups, I don't see the intellect that folk proclaimed him to have, just with regards to the stand-up. Now, when we talk about the Chappelle show, I thought that was extremely creative. I even though I didn't laugh at everything, I saw the boundaries that he was pushing, which differs from the closer special, just because I thought this was just a cheap attempt at him trying to ingratiate himself to the public. He talks so much about punching down throughout this entire special. I found him to be, again, punching down on a marginalized, disenfranchised community, right? And so I took a copious amount of notes just because I didn't want to forget anything. And again, a lot of this shit wasn't memorable at all. He talked about people calling him the GOAT. Again, I just don't see it, right? I just don't see it. As far as my brand of comedy, I think that's important. Like, I like people who push the limits, right? I like offensive jokes, but it has to have some redeeming value to it, right? So when I hear Paul Mooney, it's just like, for me, he doesn't hold a candle to Paul Mooney. Even though he brought Paul Mooney into the limelight with Ask a Negro or what have you, I found Paul Mooney, and seeing him on multiple occasions, I found him to be a thinker, right? He had his finger on the pulse of what was taking place in society and has been taking place in the society for 30, 40 years. I found Dave Chappelle to be a Canal Street knockoff that lacked depth. And so with that said, right, and again, feel free, if you watch the special and you got some thoughts about it, feel free to tap in. This is a conversation if you want to join. So he starts off by talking about, he announces that this is his last special. He says, I'm rich and famous, right? He goes into this conversation about COVID, about the vaccine. And as much credit as folk give him about his ability to talk about race, in a unique way, this shit is so lame and so basic, right? He talk about he got the Johnson & Johnson, shot. And he says it was a niggerish decision. And it's just like, bro, like, this is your last special for Netflix. This is what you desire. This is what you sat and wrote and thought, hey, this was funny. Let me say the Johnson & Johnson. That's something I came up with. That's something I come up with, right? Ranking the tiers of ranking the vaccine in tiers, right? So you got Pfizer, you got Moderna, you got Johnson & Johnson, the one shot. And so here you are, you're supposed to be the GOAT. You're supposed to be the comedic genius, but yet you're talking about, yeah, it was a niggerish decision. All right, boom, got you. Then he goes on to talk about the what's taking place within the Asian community and the violence that they've incurred over the last year and a half. And he says, listen, I was watching videos of black people being violent towards Asians. And I'm like, again, like, what is your agenda here? Right? What is your agenda here? Because I never hear you speaking about black folk in positive and affirming ways. You talk about black folk being violent towards the Asian community, right? And I'm like, fam, you don't acknowledge you don't acknowledge Trump being violent. Like the videos that you watch specifically were black folk being violent. Because the videos that I don't watch these videos, right? Because again, it's trauma porn. But the videos and a lot of the content that I saw and a lot of rhetoric that I saw on a day-to-day basis came from white folk, came from Donald Trump himself, y'all president. But yet you talk about it broke your heart to see black people. Again, isolating black folk. So we got the niggerish vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson, right? It's only good for homeless people. Now we have the black folk being violent towards Asians and Asian Americans and Pacific Islands. Again, as if the statistics bear that out. Got you. So we about 17 minutes in, and I tried to chronicle this on Twitter. You know, and again, if you want to tap in, feel free to tap in. I'm chronicling this on Twitter, 7 minutes in. This shit is terrible. 17 minutes in. This shit is terrible. I'm the Magic Johnson of COVID. Like, how long are we going to continue? You're supposed to be the GOAT. You're supposed to be the GOAT. How long do this is 30 years now. We talking about Magic Johnson. This shit is low-hanging fruit. If you're supposed to be the GOAT of comedy, make it make sense for me. Maybe I'm missing something. Why bringing up Magic Johnson? Oh, because you didn't have any symptoms, and Magic Johnson, he had HIV. And like, come on. Like, this is comedy? And what was telling for me, it was less about Dave Chappelle. I'm looking at the audience. And I see people kikiing and cracking up. And I'm like, yo, that's more concerning than this one man. Because y'all lack the wherewithal to even recognize what's taking place. Black folk laughing at this shit. Black folk laughing at this shit. All right, boom. Right? He talks about the space Jews. That was kind of creative, right? Because he's talking about what's happening in Israel and Palestine, and he took a clever way to talk about it. Space Jews, they leave and then they go up there, then they come back and they trying to reclaim quote unquote their territory. Funny maybe, right? I wrote that in parentheses. Funny maybe. Then he goes back, right? He goes back to the child's book. Oh, Clifford, the big black nigger. Folk kikiing, folk cracking up. Again, where's the redeeming value? Because so far you've talked about black folk in non-affirming ways for the first 30 minutes of your special. But yet we're supposed to think that you're out here advocating for us. Like the work that you're doing is advocating on behalf of black folk. Cause you do a little, whatever, however long that one special wasn't even necessarily a special. It was just political commentary about them, murdering George Floyd. But outside of that, like, what have you done for us? I digress. Now he's like, listen, I want to talk about the LGBTQ plus community, and he get a round of applause from the audience. And again, feel free to tap in, hit the go live button with me. If you might have similar views, you might have different views. Feel free to hop in, right? And I'm like, well, why are y'all applauding, given what his history has been, and him acknowledging what his history has been in the conversations that he's had regarding the LGBTQ plus community? Then he hit him with that release, the release of the baby joke. Right. And again, wasn't even necessarily a joke, but he talks about the baby in context of him murdering somebody in Walmart, which is common knowledge for black folk. Black folk who identify as being heterosexual, black folk who identify as being LGBTQ plus in that community. We knew this, right? So who are you speaking to, Dave? Are you speaking to white folk? Because it's like you trying to speak to white folk in a voice eerily similar of white people. And so when I made that post in my stories, for those of you who saw it, and I had the clown emoji over Dave's face, because again, it's like, what are we talking about here? You're bringing up the baby and him being canceled for making jokes about the LGBT. It wasn't even a joke. And that's the thing. He dumbed it down. I couldn't tell if he was saying wild or loud comments about the LGBTQ plus community. And he's like, even I wouldn't say anything like that. Fam, it's not even necessarily about the LGBTQ plus community. Like, he's talking about individuals impacted by HIV AIDS. A community you don't give a fuck about, because clearly you don't, because you're making jokes about Magic Johnson. Right? And so we're saying, oh, don't upset them, upset that community. Again, he's talking specifically about white LGBTQ plus folk, because he can't be talking about black folk, a marginalized, disenfranchised community that has been such since quote unquote inception. And we'll get into that conversation that he had, that disgusting conversation about glory holes and all of that shit, about he want his old gays back. Right? But he's saying with the baby, you could kill a nigga, but don't hurt the gay person's feelings. Again, reducing an entire community, people who identify with the entire community, to one specific aspect. Don't upset gay people's feelings. Again, you can take out gay people. Don't upset black folk, because they'll come after you. He didn't put, no, don't shoot him that bail. He didn't, because if he did, he would speak specifically to that each and every time. So no, I'm not shooting him bail. He mentioned it at various points, right? He mentioned it at various points. But when he's having these conversations, again, if you're the GOAT, if you're a comedic genius, it's incumbent upon you. If you're a writer, right? I tell my students this all the time. I tell myself this all the time. If you're writing something, you got to make sure that you are clear and concise, and that the message you are saying is being conveyed in the way that you desire. It should be no room for interpretation. And so when he's talking about this, the baby versus the LGBTQ plus community, he did not specify what he was talking about. Again, all this that's in red, that's all from this special. Because I know folk gonna be like, oh, well, he was talking about this, right? They might find reasons. Again, the shit was just lame for somebody who's proclaimed to be the GOAT. He says blacks are jealous of gays. Fam, again, with these comments, right, that lack any factual basis. Blacks are jealous of gays. Short-sighted, right? As if there's a difference. And he always highlights, and he highlights this at the end specifically, that he views this shit from a black-white binary, right? He views it from a black-white binary, where it's the oppression Olympics. It's who's on the list of, in this hierarchy of oppression. So, and again, I don't want to fast forward till when he gets to the young woman from the club. Not Daphne Dorman, but the other individual. He's talking about here, she's talking about his inappropriate language when it comes to conversing about the LGBTQ plus community and trans community in particular in this stand-up, and how she's a community is being offended, and he looking at the big Clifford niggas, right? The big gay Clifford niggas. And he looking at them like, fam, you gonna let her say this? Y'all black. Like, why must it be an oppression Olympics? Because we're talking about, again, the marginalization of communities here. So I'm like, fam, what are you talking about here? But he goes on. He talks about, I miss the old school gays, the glory holes gays, who used to go in the bathroom and fucking I'll read that in a second. Talking about the glory holes in the bathrooms and all of that. Again, stereotypes of a community, right? Stereotypes of a community, as if every gay man was going to go fuck in the bathroom in the park. Again, you say because the LGBT has not faced what black people have, but you're saying it as if they aren't black LGBTQ plus folk. So you can't make statements like that, or you can make statements like that, but again, it's factually inaccurate because you're not considering black folk whose intersections cross at LGBTQ plus, at gay, at X, at Z. So again, what are we talking about here? He go and I see you say the Stonewall gays. Exactly. That's what he used. My camera about to fall. And so he transitions from this conversation. See, you say intersectionality is BS. I'm not sure how intersectionality is BS. That's saying that folk aren't members of different communities. I'm not sure how that works. I think I'm inserting black gays. I'm not sure what you talk about. Again, feel free to tap in. You know what I mean? I don't want to lose the camera angle. I like the angle, so I don't want to add the comment and pin it. But everything that I'm saying here is what I wrote down, sitting there watching it. But again, to deny intersectionality is to ignore the various communities that folk are a part of. It's to deny the fact that I'm a man, that what else? I'm a part of this socioeconomic class. Then there's no such thing as middle class. There's no such thing as the elite, the 1%. There's no such thing. If there's no such thing as intersectionality, because you can't be a part of these things. Right? So then he goes on to have this conversation about does he hate women? Right? And he says he considers himself a feminist because he supports women, equal rights, right? That's how he delineates and based off Webster's dictionary of a feminist. Again, it's the problem with folk not reading, right? Like you go to the dictionary for a definition of something. And so because it says in Webster's dictionary, it says you believe in equal rights, that makes you a feminist. Even though a lot of the behaviors and the shit that you perpetuate, right, brings that into question. So when you're going out of your way and you stand up, you're supposedly the GOAT, and you calling women at every opportunity, you calling women bitches. But that's your shtick, right? Just like Gallagher, right? That's the bull with the watermelons, and he busts the watermelons, or Carrot Top. He got the little bag of props that he brings on stage. Maybe that's who Chappelle is. He got this shtick. That's what his last X amount of specials have been. A whole shtick. Maybe that's what it is. So we know his shtick is to talk about the LGBTQ community and to call women bitches. Specifically white women. And black women. Clearly. But he rock with everybody except them frumpy dykes. Right? They don't rock with the frumpy dykes. Then he offered to, and I was going to get to that. He offered to lead the movement in exchange for fellatio. Right? No, let's call it what it said. He said, suck my dick. This y'all GOAT. This who y'all call a comedic genius. And again, I'm sitting there looking at everybody in the room. And I see some people who are uncomfortable. Mind you, I haven't laughed yet. I did laugh. I did laugh once. I chuckled. Right? But again, he's telling women how to protest. He's telling, and this is part and parcel of his problems. He's telling LGBTQ plus folk what to be upset about, how they should view themselves, right? He gets to that at the end. They should only look at themselves as human beings and not experiencing the trials and tribulations and the marginalizations that they've experienced for a long period of time. Again, when I say Dave Chappelle act like a white man, that's the same shit that white men say to black folk. Act like you're a part of the human race. Why does it have to be race? Everything is race with you. Why must we know about how you're impacted disproportionately when it comes to the legal system? Why should we care about being disproportionately impacted by COVID? You're a part of the human race, damn it. Just accept it. We'll accept you then. This is what y'all go talking about. These are his words, not mine. And so in the midst of him telling women how to protest, specifically white women, he's not saying anything about how he's an ally or an ally on probation, like I call it. What specifically is he saying? Because again, I could tell women what to do. But again, if somebody says, listen, I'll lead your movement if you suck my dick, and say it in jest, that tells me everything I need to know about you. But you're a feminist because you believe in equal rights. You dig me? It's like I don't hate black people. I hired some. They work on my job. I don't hate Mexicans. I just hired some to mow my lawn. This y'all goat, right? And then he starts talking about, he goes back to talking about trans folk. And it makes you sit and think, like, for 2 and 3 hours, and I'm sure he put in time. And that's the disgusting part of all this. Dave Chappelle, for this hour and some change, hour and 12 minutes, he sat and put in time to write this shit that's not funny. But he's in the echo chamber. I tweeted out how I can see exactly how him and Talib Kweli are friends. I can see exactly how Talib Kweli is friends. Because they're self-centered and they're egotistical. But my question is bigger than that. How the fuck is Mos Def his homie? Or is everything that we think we know about Mos Def a lie? Because again, we talk this shit about, who we could tell who people are by the friends that they have. Hasn't that been one of the cliche sayings for the last umpteenth years? What does that say about Mos Def? That's just Dave being Dave. Okay. How long is that acceptable for? At what point do you desire something more? Unless that relationship ain't like it is. But I could have swore I heard Mos Def on this special. I don't know if it was at the intro or the outro, but I know I heard Mos' voice. But we continue on. Now, when I did laugh, right? When he said, because it caught me off guard. We're going to get past the trans and the Adam's apple and the knuckles and about him being scared. Right? We're going to go past that. I'm not, whatever. Right? He made the joke about, that he missed the 80s gay people, right? And the shocked face that they always had. And that picture, and I pictured that in my mind before he did it, and I chuckled, right? Because that's been the stereotype for gay folk from the 80s, right? Into the 90s. That's what we know gay folk to be. Think about a low down dirty shame. God bless the dead in Wayman, right? It always looked like he was in shock with the bottom lip droopy. And again, is that funny? No, it's not funny. But I knew exactly what he was referencing because that's been the imagery that's been pushed for 30 years now. moving forward, right? He's talking about asking for pussy they might not have. Like they got and talking about the woman in the bar, right? When he was confronted by her mother in Ohio. And it's just like, okay, all right, fam. Yeah. We get it. We get it at this point. Then he goes, I spoke earlier about the black-white binary, right? And this idea of punching down. Clearly, he doesn't get it. And this shows you, like the people we call comedic genius, we can tell that they're not doing substantial reading of anything of merits. Because clearly this would, I would hope, again, matter of fact, I take that back because I don't want to assume. But for somebody to quote Baldwin, and that's what makes you think, like, is it Uchiwali or is it One Mike? And him quoting Baldwin, I remember talking about the fire next time. But again, we all can go Google a quote from Baldwin or listen to a speech. That doesn't necessarily mean that we completely buy into what it is that they're talking about. And with that being said, what the hell was up with, I feel like Seinfeld, and what is up with Martin Luther King? Like, why was he so preoccupied with using Dr. King as a way to talk about all the shit that, and relating that to the LGBTQ plus movement and different things? Like, why was he obsessed with using that stale ass voice? Was that supposed to be funny? Comical? Again, for the audience, you're going knowing what you're getting. Right? Like, you turned into Fox News because you're looking for something to validate your thoughts, your experiences. At this stage of the game, if you're going to go see Dave Chappelle and you're offended by something that he says, then that's on you. Because he was who he was before he got here. Something at the top layer. You know I don't fuck with your mans, but sometimes he got bars that resonate. And so then, he talked about this idea that gender is a fact. Right? That gender is a fact. Ignoring the fact that it's a social construct. Again, you have to want to understand something at a deeper level. Because we all came out of pussy. Comedic genius. And somehow gender is a fact. Now, is he talking about biology? Right? Again, when you know better, you do better. And that's the beautiful thing about science. When we have more information, that's the beauty about having thinkers. They're supposed to push the boundaries. Right? They're supposed to think at a deeper level. And so maybe 20 years ago, yes, gender was a fact. It was black. It was women. It was men from a societal perspective. But dog, this ain't 84. This ain't 92. When you was cooning in Nutty Professor 2. This 2021, if you still spewing gender is a fact, but this is what I talk about with old folk. Dave Chappelle, 50 some odd years old. Why would he change? It's hard to get old people to change their views on things. This no different than somebody telling me, yo, go listen to Tyler the Creator. Not Tyler, because Tyler a little bit in my class as far as like musical sound. Go listen to Pooh Shiesty, who facing life in prisoners. Go listen to Pooh. Why would I go listen to? They can't rap. It's mumble rap. It's no different. But his is much more dangerous because the rhetoric that he continues to spew, as we see, that shit is harmful. That's the shit that get people killed. You ain't no woman. You a nigga, so I'm gonna treat you like a nigga. Right? But this y'all goat. I talked about that earlier, Mike. He leans into it. And he talks about, at the end, I'll get into what he talked about at the end. But again, he doesn't get it. And then he goes into, I guess he's trying to, garner sympathy or empathy, because he talked about empathy from the folk, right? Talking about Daphne Dorman. As always, if somebody want to tap in, feel free to tap in, hit the live button. Because again, you ain't got to agree with what I'm saying. This is my perspective on it. Right? But he talks about Daphne Dorman and how he wants trans people not to speak their truth. He wants his trans persons not to speak their truth. And that's where I talked about this idea of focusing on humanity. Because that's not what she was. Even though he's clearly, even after, and I'm not going into the whole Daphne Dorman situation, that's the I got a black friend. Like when I talk about my white friends, I talk about Mike and I talk about Jamie. I say I got 2 white friends who cool with me. They allies on probation. You know what I mean? I always throw them out there. And that's what he did with Daphne Dorman. And because she died by suicide, we're supposed to say, oh, you know what? See, this is what cyberbullying does. This is what cyberbullying does. He talks about Twitter not being a real place, right? Because that's easy. You get to dismiss people when you don't view their where they at or anything that they're saying, or if there's taking place in a public space. You don't have to value it, right? You can just poo-poo it. But even with that, it was disrespectful to this Daphne Dorman's person legacy. Even though I can't speak for it, right? But when you talk about setting up this trust, and when I meet your daughter, your young child, and they turn 21, I'll be able to say, young lady, I knew your father. She was a good woman. Like, why? Why is that necessary? Like, why even, you got it framed in your mind already? Or is this a joke? Is this another joke from the comedic genius? Right? And so lastly, before walking away, he says, in LGBTQ plus LMNOP, stop punching down on my people, and drops the mic. Probably the lamest way, the lamest mic drop that I've ever seen. Dave Chappelle makes Kevin Hart look like Eddie Murphy. And so those were my takeaways from it. I was like, listen, that hour, that 72 minutes that I spent listening to him, I wish I could get it back. My stance hasn't changed at all from my stories. Because some folks are like, how can you comment on it if you didn't watch the whole thing and get his points? Yeah, he did say he wouldn't make any more gay trans jokes again. But fam, that's what you've been doing for the last 4 specials. So what do you have in your bag? And he tried to garner support from folk, right? Because we know when we talk about walking away from jobs, people always bring up Dave Chappelle and leaving money on the table. So he had to bring up, I left $50 million on the table. Cause what? Cause you didn't want to coon, but somehow you still find your way to cooning. Somebody make it make sense. I know somebody got some thoughts on it. Again, feel free to hit the live button. But I'm still taking it back from it's no such thing as intersectionality. Like, how hard do you have to work to ignore, to deny certain things? Right? I sit and often wonder about that. Like, how hard do you have to work to ignore certain things? Is it like, listen, I just don't have the capacity for it? I would rather somebody say that, like, listen, I just ain't got the capacity to learn about anything new or to consider any other perspectives. I'm not sure what difference of opinion means though, because if every black joke that he made during this special was in a negative way, so what is that? So if you, and again, we can have different definitions of what cooning is. It's not necessarily a word that I like even using, but if in every special that you have, in this special he talked about Clifford the big black nigger, right? He talked about who else he talked about? He talked about Magic Johnson, right? The low hanging fruit. What other anti-black jokes did he spew? Let me go to the pages. Because again, it's not a difference of opinion. At some point, we got to call a spade a spade. If your difference of opinion is harmful to folk, and harmful especially to black folk, then that shit is cooning to me. Because your words are violent enough to have people, to reinforce views of people that are out here killing folk, that are out here killing black trans women. Yes. Maybe you don't know my stance on hip hop. It's a lot of fucking cooning in hip hop because a lot of this shit is violent and it's dangerous and it reinforces ideals that are problematic to a community. So when I hear Future talking about I'm too wavy, what did he say? I'm too sexy for the syrup or whatever it is. That is fucking cooning to me. Why? Not because I lost my brother to opioid use. But opioid use is a real problem in society, and not only in society, and we know it became a real issue when it came to white folk, right? But it's a problem in hip hop. So when Lil Wayne is having seizures, when Rick Ross is having seizures, when you got young folk out here addicted to Percocets and Molly and shit, and we know that folk are using it. We know they're using it based off the lyrics. Because their favorite person is doing it. And even though Jay-Z said Scarface the movie did more than Scarface the rapper. Scarface the rapper is still super influential. Right? And so yeah, it's aspects of hip hop where it's cooning. I look at cooning where it's detrimental to a community when it doesn't have to be. So the shit that Dave was spewing in this special, it was unnecessary. And again, if we're crowning him as being the GOAT, and you let me know, maybe it's something that I missed. What are we walking away from that says, yo, you made me think differently about something? Because his comedy is supposed to be steeped in intellect. So what are we walking away from this special or his last X amount of specials that says, hey, this made me think critically? I could do that with the Chappelle show. And I'm not going to discredit him for that. But it got me thinking like, damn, what was Neil Brennan's role for real? Because sans Neil Brennan, this shit is looking funny in the light. Your comedic genius status. And again, if somebody feels differently, feel free to tap in. You know what I mean? You can hit the live button. I don't know. I don't know. Like at this stage of the game, I think I'm at a loss for words. I think hopefully I articulated my views on this bull. We'll it's an element of white supremacy that's willing to accept homosexuality over blackness. Okay. And I'm gonna give you a mace line. Maybe it's a problematic mace line. Like, please tell me something that I don't know. Like, if we have sex, you don't want dough. Tell us something that we don't know. How many specials do we need you to continue to hone in and reinforce this point that you didn't even do a good job of articulating? Because if you did, you would have phrased and framed a lot of that dialogue in this special differently. I don't know. Somebody let me know. And so, yeah, when he made the point, like, oh, when he was in Austin and they called the cops on him, right? Because he got in their face and their whiteness took over. Ha ha. If it was a black person, we not going to call the cops because we know we still black at the end of the day. But when you say you want your Stonewall gaze back, what is that? What is that saying to Marsha, followers of Marsha and them? What is that? What is that saying? What is that saying to black LGBTQ folks? And so this is where I got to hit you with, again, another bar from the bull who I despise. Is it Uchiwali or is it one Mike? Because if you're trying to show us this element of white supremacy that's willing to accept homosexuality over blackness, then why are you going out of your way to still demean a community that black folk are a part of? I don't know. You got to make it make sense. I don't know. I mean, that might be all I have. I see a lot of y'all in here. I wish somebody would tap in so we could have this convo. And what stood out, and I saw, who was it? I forget the boy name. I saw it after I posted it. I see Jason Whitlock talking about, yeah, he's speaking to the establishment, as if Netflix isn't a part of the establishment. Who did he not demean? He didn't demean black hetero cis males. Did he demean them? I didn't hear a joke about hetero cis black males. Let me go through the notes. I saw him try to defend and justify the baby and don't take food out of his mouth. Let me see. I'm going through the notes. I'm trying to see something that he said about hetero black men. Maybe the Magic Johnson joke? Could we consider that? But again, that's speaking to the HIV/AIDS community, right? And the HIV AIDS joke that the baby said. But I don't know. He ain't say nothing about his one of his homies. But again, if you saw something that I didn't see, and that's what's puzzling, because it's like, it's the same way I feel about Kevin Hart. I don't think Kevin Hart's very funny, right? But at least he tries to go through different areas. He talks about his life. He talks about different aspects, right? The shit's not funny, but he tries. He says, I didn't understand his need we need to understand his environment he developed in. I think when we talk about, the concept, and I don't necessarily remember him saying that specifically when it came to the baby. I know he talked about his career. I know he talked about the homicide, self-defense homicide, right? I don't know if they can go together. But the self-defense killing with regards to the baby. But I don't remember him speaking directly to him and his environment and the purpose and point of understanding that. I think, again, he was using the baby as a prop to push an agenda, which is nasty. You know what I'm saying? Like he using the baby to push an agenda, an anti-LGBTQ plus agenda, a hateful agenda. You can't be pro-black and anti-LGBTQ plus. It's impossible. Should I hit you with the Biggie line with the two? I'm not going to do it. But you can't be pro-black and anti-LGBTQ because you got some crazy cognitive dissonance that's taking place. Dangerous and harmful cognitive dissonance that's taking place. But wasn't an acceptance a pushback on the acceptance in murder culture, or was it hot? Was it? Would he be bringing it? Let me see. How can I put this? You say, what about D.L. Hughley? He speaks truth too at times. Listen, I haven't listened to a D.L. Hughley comedy special in a long time. I can't necessarily tell you what D.L. believes. I don't watch his. I think I watched one Breakfast Club interview and he said some problematic shit, and so I was off it from that point. But I don't want to gloss over it. It was a pushback on the acceptance in murder culture. Was it a pushback though? Again, for somebody who's supposed to be an intellectual, a comedic genius, the GOAT, was it any type of pushback to murder culture? I don't think he stayed with it long enough for it to be that. He had an overarching point, which was the LGBTQ plus community in America will end your career. Why can't you be pro-black but not LGBTQ? Because black folk, it's intersectionality. There are black lesbians, gays, bisexual, trans, queer people, non-binary folk. And so if you're anti-LGBTQ plus, you're anti-black folk because black folk exist. Again, it has to be some major cognitive dissonance that exists if you're able to love black folk but hate black folk. That's a weird space to be in. People need to be held accountable for their actions and views, especially though they have mass following and accountability. And I spoke to that scrap music. You came in kind of late, fam. You know what I mean? You like an hour and some change late. I've been rolling, right? But that is what it is, right? He doesn't acknowledge that because again, even when he gets rolling, he always goes back to gay, right? It stops being LGBTQ plus, and then it goes to gay people. It's like he goes back to default. Which again highlights this disdain that he has that he refuses to acknowledge. And again, we talk about his anti-blackness. I brought up the anti-blackness when he talked about the videos that he watched of black people being violent towards Asians. Like, how anti-black is that? You don't talk about all the other groups, like how a president literally called shit the China virus. But it's the videos against my black people. Beating up people that look like my wife. That's what you might as well say. But then he tried to be a little clever with I guess the same thing is happening in my body. Like, again, who mans is this? Who mans? It says, is he anti-gay? I mean, is water wet? Is water wet? And so the blind spots get realer and realer, right? And I think we're at a place now where if folk don't see it, they don't want to see it. Like the majority of the people that went to go pay money to go see the bull. You just don't want to see it. Some people like sitting in their ignorance. Some folk call it a difference of opinion. Tomato, tomato. Call it what you want. But it's the shit like that that get folk killed every day, B. You missing what? Says it seems like an old school mentality, but that only goes so far. He refuses to evolve because he's, how old is Dave Chappelle? Somebody know out there. And again, feel free if you want to tap in, hit the go live button, feel free. How old is Dave? Dave like 54, 55, some probably older than that maybe. It's hard to get old black folk, old Negroes to change their minds about things because you've had X amount of years experience and life being one way. Now I think Dave older than 50. Jay-Z 50. I think Dave older than him. And so that's why because he talked a lot about empathy, having empathy. Empathy is a bullshit term when you don't want to acknowledge your situation. So you want people, it's not a bullshit term all the time, but it's a bullshit term when used by people like him because you want your experience validated. And that's what I think it is. And I think he ended with that. His experience of being a black man who married an Asian wife, an Asian woman, and has had to go his career. It was questions about Dave. Like, is Dave black? It's been questions about Dave pre-Chappelle show. Does he really speak to the black experience? He sold the sisters out. And so that's Dave's problem. Dave has never had his experience as a black man validated. And so now he wants to invalidate the experiences of others. And he tries to cloak it in awful writing that is his stand-up comedy. At least I know if D.L. Hughley, and I know he's problematic, I at least know that he's going to frame it in a way that may garner a chuckle. Dave was like he was just reading out of his diary. But this is y'all GOAT. Why? Because he speaks truth to power. I missed it. And that's what I'm asking for. Please let me know. Did I miss it? What was he speaking truth to power about? He just wants to be heard, right? And he thinks he's doing it on behalf of black folk. And that's the scary part. He thinks all of this is being done in the name of black folk. Like, Dave, nobody asked you for this. Not this. I'd rather you go build some schools like LeBron in Ohio. Because I know black LGBTQ plus folk didn't ask you for this. I don't think so because they always seem to mention that he is rich. Hence why COVID ain't concerned him much because he get the helping. It was an airing of grievances more than actual stand-up. But how long are we going to continue to take this from him? That's why I wasn't going to tune in until people feel you got to watch it though. You got to watch it to get the context that he was talking. And all it did was reinforce. I don't even want to call them blind spots. And And again, where was his homies to say, fam? Like, who was in the writer's room with him? Or maybe he doesn't have a writer's room. And so I did a synopsis of the entire special, and I see more people starting to come in. And again, feel free to tap in. You can hit the go live button, man. If you disagree with anything that I've said, or if you agree, feel free to come through. Help me understand. Trust me, I want to. I want to give Dave the benefit of the doubt. I want to laugh. Like, I dare you. And again, if you consider Dave Chappelle to be the GOAT, right? I dare you to go watch a Paul Mooney video. Like, think about the joke, and I posted it, the joke that he did on Letterman. Right? Where where the kid put his face in like the chocolate pie or chocolate cake or whatever it is, and he went to his mom and he said, look, mommy, I'm black. His mom hit him and then said, go show your dad. And he went to go show his dad and said, look, Dad, I'm black. His dad hit him and said, go show your grandpa. Look, Grandpa, I'm black. His grandpa hit him. He said, go back to mom and say, have you learned anything? He's like, listen, I've been black for X amount of minutes and I know I hate you white folk. Like, fam, like, that's intellectual comedy. That's something that we can have a conversation on. That's something we can have a conversation on. Not Clifford the big black nigga. What do I do with that? Maybe we can have a conversation about the Space Jews book. That was the only thing of merit. What else? I think that's all I got, man. Well, and feel free. What do y'all feel free to drop your thoughts if you're not trying to go live on camera. Then he tried to end it by saying we are all human beings. Again, and I talked about that, Max Out G's, right? He talks about we are all human and that's the same rhetoric that white folk talk about. That they spew. Hey, forget your pronouns. We're human. Hey, forget slavery. Slavery was 400 years ago. You're a human being. Stop using that as an excuse. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Work hard like all the other niggas. All the other black folk did. And that's when I say Dave want to be a white man. And maybe with his hundreds of millions of dollars, Dave thinks he's a white man. Until Paul Mooney talk about when you get your nigga wake up call. But unfortunately, Dave not going to get it. Dave too far removed. He talked about, and I mentioned this, when he brought up Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart probably like, yo, leave me out of that. Like, leave me out of that. Do I agree with Kevin Hart being told about the about his old tweets from 10 years ago? Hell no. Because I'm a firm believer in growth. That's why when I just applied for this job at Stockton University, they talking about social media and they want to do a scan of my social media with my permission. And I'm thinking, what the hell are y'all looking for? Because if you go back 10 years, I might have said some wild shit at 27. And that's with me being aware. Sometimes players fuck up. It's a difference if I say something 10 years ago, right? And I've sensed and there's evidence that I've evolved in my thinking as opposed to me posting something yesterday. There's a high likelihood that if I did say I changed, it means that I've changed because of this opportunity. And so when it came to Kevin Hart, like, why are you even bringing that up? To hit home, what point exactly? Cancel culture? Let me see. I think I missed a comment. Dave fails to understand that being a black man doesn't exempt him from still being in places of privilege and perpetuate oppression. Again, and that's the blind spot that we talk about, right? But again, that's when we talk about who's in your circle. He lives in Ohio on a farm with his Asian wife. He talks to Talib Kweli. right? And I have all sorts of questions for Mos Def. All sorts of questions for Mos Def. Like, how is this your man's? And you haven't checked them. Or maybe Mos has, he fundamentally believes some of the shit that's that same shit. I mean, we do all make mistakes, and it depends what the mistakes are, right? Yes, there's opportunity for growth. I do believe in redemption. I think it definitely the offense impacts whether we offer somebody the opportunity to grow as a society. Because if we think about Robert, I don't necessarily think Robert's going to get that benefit of the doubt. I don't believe there's any restorative justice that's going to be offered to your man Rob Kelly. I think where Dave has gone, this path that he's gone down, is there an opportunity for redemption? Potentially. But then I think that would mean, I don't know what that means. He says he's not going to tell any more jokes about LGBTQ plus folk. But I don't think that doesn't garner any type of redemption. That doesn't have any redeeming qualities. What's the conversation going to look like going forward? We say, well, serious question, why is what Dave say about LGBTQ plus important? Again, when we talk about the same reason why my cat are snapping on my dog. The same way we talk about, or the same way I talk about what Future says is, it's not necessarily important, but it's influential. And so if it's influential, it's important. And so I've met teenage kids who say, yo, I wanted to try a Percocet because Future talked about it. And so when we talk about what Dave says about the LGBTQ plus folk, what Dave says about women, what Dave says about black women, that's more fuel on the fire. That's reinforcing shit that gets people harmed in real life. It's violence. It's violence. And we saw what violent words can do. Look at what they trying to deny now. What was that? January 5th, January 6th, when them white folks start wilding. We see what harmful rhetoric can do. And so that's why it's important. Because it's impactful, it's influential. That's just how we give it up in society. And not just Western society. This is all across the world. Celebrity matters. Celebrity is influential. It's the reason why the NFL went to go get y'all mans. Because they wanted to quiet y'all niggas up. And y'all man said, you know what? I'm going to give you Dre. I'm going to give you Mary J. Blige. I'm going to give you Kendrick Lamar to appease you niggas. Not knowing he a puppet. But again, when you got that type of money, right, you think you on equal playing field. It's funny. Like the same shit he said about OJ, still a nigga. Same thing we can say about him. I'm just trying to determine which influence we hold accountable. I mean, it's we know as a society who we hold accountable and who we don't hold accountable. If this was, I'm trying to think of a comedian, and we're not even, and that's the problem. We're not even holding Dave accountable. Dave isn't being held accountable because he's reached status. He's reached status with white folk, that conservative bunch who eating off every word he say, with black folk who think this the Dave Chappelle from the Chappelle show. Not the same person no more. Can't be. And so we know as a community who we hold accountable. If Jim down the street, we not holding Jim accountable. Jim could get off with this because nobody care what Jim say. So I've been running now. What time is it? 9:30. I gave y'all about an hour. Listen, man, I appreciate y'all coming through. Rhetorically speaking, we'll be back at some point. School kicking my ass. Hashtag You Good Man Podcast and Men's Group will be back at some point. But I appreciate you all for tuning in for this hour. And again, hopefully I gave you something to think about. Hopefully it wasn't just me railing on Dave Chappelle. That was a large majority of it. But ask yourself this question. Can you be pro-black and anti-LGBTQ plus? Ask yourself that. All right, I'm out. Y'all be safe.